Your ancestors never needed braces, not once, in hundreds of thousands of years. So why does almost everyone you know have crooked teeth today? The answer isn't about how well you brush. It isn't about how many times your mother told you to stop sucking your thumb. The real answer is something ancient going wrong inside your genes, and it is happening to almost all of us at the same time, in almost every part of the world. If you have ever looked in the mirror and wondered why your teeth twist, overlap, or crowd together when your parents' generation seemed to manage just fine, you are about to understand exactly why. And once you understand it, you will never look at a crooked smile the same way again. For most of human history, dental crowding was rare. Anthropologists who study ancient skulls consistently find something strange when they compare our ancestors to us. Skulls that are tens of thousands of years old almost always show wide, spacious jaws with teeth sitting neatly in a row, roots straight, no overlapping, no crowding, no impacted wisdom teeth pushing sideways into the jawbone. Move forward a few thousand years and something shifts. Jaws start to shrink. Teeth start to crowd. Wisdom teeth start getting trapped with nowhere to go. This did not happen because human DNA suddenly mutated on a massive scale. It happened because the environment humans lived in changed faster than their genes could adapt, and that mismatch between old genetic instructions and a new modern world is at the very heart of why your teeth may be crooked today. Here's the part that surprises most people. Jaw size and tooth size are not controlled by the same set of genes working together as a single unit. They are controlled by separate genetic programs that develop somewhat independently of each other, then have to somehow fit together perfectly for you to end up with a straight, functional bite. Think about what that means. You might inherit the gene variants responsible for larger teeth from one parent, and inherit the gene variants responsible for a smaller, more compact jaw from the other parent. Neither parent needs to have crooked teeth themselves for this combination to happen. Your mother could have a beautiful straight smile. Your father could have a beautiful straight smile. And yet, the specific combination of their DNA, recombined inside you, can produce a jaw that is simply too small to comfortably hold the teeth it was given. That is not bad luck in the way people usually think about luck. It is a precise, traceable genetic mismatch, and it is one of the leading reasons dental crowding exists at all. Scientists studying this call it a polygenic trait, which is a technical way of saying that no single gene is responsible for whether your teeth come in straight or crooked. Dozens of genes contribute small effects that stack on top of each other, influencing how your jawbone grows, how large your teeth develop, how your bite forms, and how your face takes shape during childhood. Because so many genes are involved, researchers have spent decades trying to isolate exactly which ones matter most. And the picture has only become clear relatively recently thanks to large-scale genetic studies that can scan the entire human genome and look for patterns shared by people with similar dental structures. One gene that keeps showing up in this research is called TWIST1, which plays a role in craniofacial development, the very process that shapes your skull and jaw while you are still in the womb and continuing through early childhood. Variations in this gene have been linked directly to malocclusion, meaning the way your upper and lower teeth line up when you bite down. Other candidate genes affect enamel formation, tooth bud development, and the signaling pathways that tell your body when and where to grow bone in your face. None of these genes work alone. They work together, layered on top of each other, creating an outcome that is unique to you but traceable back through your family tree. This is why crooked teeth so often run in families, and why orthodontists will frequently ask new patients about their parents' dental history before treatment even begins. If one or both of your parents had noticeable crowding, an overbite, an underbite, or a crossbite, there is a meaningfully higher chance you inherited the genetic tendencies that produce those same patterns. This does not mean your dental future is locked in from birth with no possibility of change. It means your baseline risk was shaped long before your first tooth ever broke through your gums. Families often notice this pattern without realizing the deeper genetic reason behind it. A grandmother mentions that her daughter has the same slight overbite she had at that age. A father sees his son developing the same crowded lower teeth he remembers battling with braces as a teenager. These are not coincidences. They are genetic inheritance patterns playing out exactly as the underlying biology predicts, generation after generation. Now, let's return to the evolutionary piece of this puzzle, because it explains something that genetics alone cannot fully answer. If jaw size and tooth size mismatches have always been theoretically possible throughout human history, why does crowding seem so much more common now than it was among our distant ancestors? The leading explanation involves a combination of genetics and something called developmental plasticity, which is the idea that your genes provide a range of possible outcomes, and the specific environment you grow up in determines where within that range you actually land. Your jawbone is not fixed in size the moment you are born. It continues developing throughout childhood, and how it develops is influenced heavily by the forces placed on it, particularly the forces created by chewing. Ancient human diets required far more chewing than modern diets do. Before agriculture, before processed food, before the invention of items like ground flour, canned goods, and ultra-soft packaged snacks, humans ate tough, fibrous, unprocessed foods that demanded serious muscular effort to break down. Every bite exercised the jaw muscles and applied mechanical stress to the growing jawbone, and that stress is a critical signal during childhood development. It tells the bone to grow wider, stronger, and larger to accommodate the forces being placed on it. Modern diets, by comparison, are dramatically softer. Baby food, refined carbohydrates, pre-cut and processed meals, and softer cooking methods mean that children today chew far less vigorously and far less frequently than children did even a few hundred years ago, let alone tens of thousands of years ago. Less mechanical stress during those critical developmental years means the jawbone often does not grow to the fuller size its genetic blueprint would otherwise allow. The genetic instructions for tooth size have not changed nearly as quickly, if at all. The result is a jaw that develops smaller than it might have in a different environment, trying to hold teeth that are still roughly the same size they have always been. That mismatch is precisely what produces crowding, impaction, and the twisted, overlapping smiles so many people deal with today. This does not mean environment alone is responsible and genetics plays no role. It means the two factors interact constantly, with genetics setting the underlying range of possibility and environment determining where you land within that range. Some people carry genetic variants that produce naturally roomy jaws no matter what they eat, and they may go through life with straight teeth despite a completely modern soft diet. Others carry genetic variants that produce naturally tighter jaw-to-tooth ratios, and for them, even a reasonably active chewing lifestyle during childhood may not be enough to prevent crowding. This is exactly why two siblings raised in the same household, eating the same meals, can end up with completely different dental outcomes. Their shared environment was identical. Their genetic inheritance from their parents was not, because each child receives a different random combination of genetic material from both parents, which is why siblings resemble each other without being identical. Beyond this general pattern of crowding caused by tooth and jaw size mismatch, there is another category of genetic influence that deserves serious attention because it explains cases of misalignment that go well beyond typical inherited traits. Certain genetic conditions directly and significantly disrupt normal dental development. Hyperdontia is a condition where a person develops extra teeth beyond the standard number, and those additional teeth crowd the mouth and force existing teeth out of proper alignment as they compete for space. Hypodontia works in the opposite direction, where one or more teeth simply never develop at all, which can cause the remaining teeth to shift and drift into the resulting gaps over time, creating spacing and alignment problems that would not occur if every tooth had developed normally. Both of these conditions have identifiable genetic origins, often linked to specific gene mutations that disrupt the signaling pathways controlling tooth bud formation early in development. Ectodermal dysplasia is another genetic condition worth understanding because it illustrates just how deeply genetics can shape not only tooth position but tooth structure itself. This condition affects the development of tissues derived from the ectoderm, which includes skin, hair, nails, and teeth. People with certain forms of ectodermal dysplasia can experience significant tooth abnormalities, including missing teeth, unusually shaped teeth, and disrupted enamel formation, all of which compound to create serious alignment challenges that extend far beyond what simple crowding would cause on its own. Amelogenesis imperfecta represents yet another genetic condition, this one affecting enamel specifically. People with this condition inherit defective or severely thinned enamel, which not only makes teeth more vulnerable to sensitivity, wear, and breakage, but can also contribute to malocclusion as the compromised tooth structure interacts poorly with normal bite forces over time. These conditions are relatively rare compared to ordinary genetic crowding, but they demonstrate an important point. When people ask whether crooked teeth come from DNA, the honest answer spans a wide spectrum from the subtle, everyday genetic variation in jaw and tooth size that affects nearly everyone to a much smaller group of specific, identifiable genetic conditions that can dramatically alter dental development in more severe and visible ways. There is compelling supporting evidence for this evolutionary mismatch theory that goes beyond simply comparing ancient skulls to modern ones. Researchers who have studied isolated populations still living with traditional, unprocessed diets, populations that had limited exposure to modern industrial food, consistently found dramatically lower rates of crowding and malocclusion compared to relatives from the very same genetic population who had moved into cities and adopted softer, more processed eating patterns. In some of these comparative studies, siblings or close relatives sharing nearly identical genetic backgrounds showed strikingly different dental outcomes depending purely on which diet and lifestyle they grew up with. One group, raised on tough, fibrous, traditional foods requiring extensive chewing, developed wide dental arches with ample room for every tooth. The other group, raised on softer, refined modern foods after migrating to more urbanized settings, developed narrower arches and noticeably more crowding, despite carrying essentially the same genetic material. This kind of natural experiment offers some of the strongest evidence available that genetics sets the range of possibility for jaw development, while environment, particularly the mechanical demands placed on the jaw during the critical growth years of early childhood, determines where within that genetic range a person actually ends up. Twin studies add another important layer of evidence to this picture, because they allow researchers to separate genetic influence from environmental influence with far more precision than population comparisons alone. Identical twins share essentially all of their DNA, while fraternal twins share roughly half, similar to any two siblings. When researchers compare how closely identical twins match each other in jaw shape, tooth size, and overall bite alignment against how closely fraternal twins match each other, the identical twins consistently show far greater similarity. This pattern holds up across multiple independent studies conducted in different countries with different populations, and it provides strong statistical support for the idea that a substantial portion of the variation in human dental alignment, often estimated at somewhere between 50 and 80%, depending on the specific trait being measured, can be attributed to genetic factors rather than environment alone. That still leaves meaningful room for environmental influence, which lines up perfectly with everything discussed earlier about diet, chewing habits, and behaviors like thumb sucking or mouth breathing. Genetics and environment are not competing explanations here. They are two halves of the same story, working together to determine the final shape of your smile. Feeding patterns during infancy represent another environmental factor that researchers have connected to this broader genetic and developmental story, and it is one that surprises a lot of people when they hear about it for the first time. Breastfeeding requires an infant to use significantly more jaw and facial muscle effort compared to bottle feeding, because the mechanics of extracting milk from a breast involve a different and more demanding suckling motion than drawing milk through a bottle nipple. Some research has suggested that this early muscular effort during infancy may contribute in a small but measurable way to healthier jaw and palate development, adding yet another layer of mechanical stimulation on top of the chewing-related stimulation that becomes more relevant once solid foods enter the picture. This does not mean bottle-fed infants are destined for crooked teeth, and countless individually bottle-fed people grow up with perfectly straight smiles thanks to favorable genetics and other positive developmental factors. It simply reinforces the broader theme running through all of this research, which is that jaw development is a use-dependent process, shaped continuously by mechanical forces from infancy all the way through adolescence, layered on top of a genetic foundation that determines how responsive and how favorable that development will ultimately be. There is also a health dimension to this conversation that extends well beyond appearance, and it deserves attention because it shows why understanding the genetic roots of jaw and tooth development matters for more than just cosmetic reasons. A narrow jaw, produced by the same genetic and developmental mismatch responsible for crowded teeth, often means a narrower airway as well, since the structures of the jaw, palate, and airway develop in close coordination with each other during childhood. Researchers studying sleep disorders have found associations between underdeveloped jaws and an increased risk of airway obstruction during sleep, including conditions like sleep-disordered breathing and, in more significant cases, obstructive sleep apnea. This connection has led some orthodontists and researchers to argue that early intervention for jaw development, particularly techniques designed to widen a growing child's palate and jaw during the years when bone is still highly responsive, may offer benefits that extend beyond a straighter smile, potentially supporting healthier airway development as well. This emerging area of research is still being actively studied and refined, but it illustrates just how far-reaching the consequences of that ancient genetic mismatch between tooth size and jaw size can actually be, touching not just how your smile looks, but potentially how well you breathe while you sleep. Given how significant this genetic component is, it should not surprise you that malocclusion ranks as one of the most common dental health conditions in the entire world. Global health organizations that track oral health statistics consistently place malocclusion as the third most prevalent dental condition, trailing only tooth decay and gum disease. Think about the scale of that. This is not a rare quirk affecting a small, unlucky subset of the population. It is a condition rooted in fundamental, widespread genetic patterns interacting with the modern environment that most of the developed world now shares. Softer diets, more processed food, less mechanical chewing stress during childhood development, combined with the ancient genetic instructions still coded into human DNA for tooth size and jaw growth. Together, they explain why crooked teeth have become almost the norm rather than the exception in much of the modern world. It is worth pausing here to address something important, because genetics explaining crowding does not mean genetics excuses ignoring other contributing factors. Environmental and behavioral influences absolutely still matter, and they interact directly with the genetic foundation already in place. Prolonged thumb sucking or pacifier use beyond the toddler years can apply consistent pressure that pushes front teeth outward and narrows the roof of the mouth over time. Chronic mouth breathing, often caused by allergies, enlarged tonsils, or nasal obstructions, changes the resting position of the tongue and jaw, which can alter how the jawbone develops during childhood growth spurts. Tongue thrusting, a habit where the tongue pushes against the teeth during swallowing rather than resting properly against the roof of the mouth, can gradually shift tooth position over years of repeated pressure. Early loss of baby teeth, whether from decay or injury, can cause neighboring teeth to drift into the empty space, disrupting the guided path that permanent teeth were meant to follow as they emerged. None of these factors override your underlying genetic blueprint entirely, but they can absolutely push outcomes in a worse direction when combined with genetics that were already working against roomy, well-aligned teeth. This is precisely why understanding your genetic risk matters practically, not just scientifically. If you know malocclusion tends to run in your family, addressing habits like prolonged thumb sucking or mouth breathing early becomes even more important. Because you are not just managing an isolated behavior, you are managing a behavior stacked on top of an existing genetic predisposition. This brings us to one of the most exciting developments in this entire field, which is the growing role of genetic testing and personalized dentistry. For most of the history of orthodontics, treatment decisions were based almost entirely on what a dentist or orthodontist could physically observe in a patient's mouth, combined with x-rays and family history reported verbally by the patient. That approach works reasonably well, but it is fundamentally reactive. It identifies problems after they have already developed rather than predicting them in advance. Genetic research is beginning to change that. As scientists identify more of the specific genes and gene variants associated with jaw size, tooth size, and craniofacial development, the long-term possibility emerges of genetic screening that could flag a child's elevated risk for crowding or malocclusion years before their permanent teeth even begin to erupt. Imagine a future where a simple genetic test administered in early childhood could tell parents and dentists that a particular child carries genetic markers strongly associated with a narrow jaw and larger than average teeth, allowing for proactive intervention, perhaps through palate expanders or other early orthodontic techniques designed to encourage wider jaw growth during the years when the jawbone is still highly responsive to guided development. This kind of predictive, personalized approach represents a genuine shift in how dental care could work, moving from reactive treatment after problems appear to proactive management based on an individual's specific genetic risk profile. This research is still developing, and widespread genetic screening for dental alignment is not yet a standard part of routine pediatric care, but the scientific foundation is being built right now through the kind of large-scale genetic studies referenced earlier, the ones scanning entire genomes searching for patterns linked to malocclusion across thousands of study participants. Every study that identifies another contributing gene, every mouse model that helps researchers understand how specific genetic pathways influence jaw development, every family-based genetic analysis that traces malocclusion patterns across generations, all of it moves the field closer to a future where dental alignment can be predicted and managed with the same kind of genetic insight already transforming other areas of medicine. Orthodontics has historically been one of the more visually obvious fields in healthcare, where the evidence of a problem is right there for everyone to see every time someone smiles. It makes sense that it would eventually become one of the fields most transformed by genetic science. Because the underlying causes have always been written into DNA, we simply lacked the tools to read that information clearly until relatively recently. So what does all of this mean for you, sitting here right now, whether you have crooked teeth yourself, or you're a parent wondering about your child's dental future, or you're simply someone who has always been curious about why some people need braces and others never do? It means the crowding, the overlapping, the twisted bite you may have lived with for years was never really about a lack of discipline or a failure to take care of your teeth properly as a child. It was written into the specific combination of genes you inherited from two people who each carried their own unique genetic instructions for jaw size, tooth size, and craniofacial growth, instructions shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, and then thrown into a completely different modern environment defined by soft, processed food and far less mechanical chewing stress than the environment those genetic instructions originally evolved to handle. Your ancestors were not straighter-toothed because they were somehow healthier or more disciplined than you. They lived in an environment that consistently pushed their jaw development toward its fuller genetic potential through the sheer physical demand of eating tough, fibrous food every single day of their lives, starting from early childhood. You, living in a world of soft bread, ground meat, and pre-cut everything, never received that same developmental push. And so your jawbone, for many people, simply did not grow as wide as your genetic blueprint theoretically allowed. Understanding this does not mean there is nothing to be done about existing crowding. Modern orthodontics is remarkably effective precisely because it works with an understanding of these underlying causes rather than against them. Palate expanders can gently widen a jaw during childhood when growth plates are still active and responsive. Braces and clear aligners can guide teeth into properly aligned positions, even in a jaw that never developed as wide as it might have under different environmental conditions. Extraction-based treatment plans, when genuinely necessary, can create enough space to properly align remaining teeth when overcrowding is severe. Early intervention, ideally starting with an orthodontic evaluation around the age most professional dental organizations recommend, gives orthodontists the opportunity to work with a child's jaw while it is still growing, and most responsive to guided treatment rather than waiting until growth has finished and treatment options become more limited to purely tooth movement rather than actual jaw development. None of this changes the genetic story behind why crowding happened in the first place, but it demonstrates that genetics is not destiny in any absolute sense. It is a starting point, a set of tendencies and probabilities, not an unchangeable sentence. If there is one thing worth remembering from everything we have covered, it is this. Crooked teeth are not a personal failure, and they are not simply the result of bad habits during childhood, even though habits absolutely play a contributing role. They are the visible result of an ancient genetic mismatch playing out inside your own mouth. A mismatch between tooth-size genetics that have remained relatively stable for a very long time, and jaw-size genetics interacting with a radically changed modern environment that offers far less mechanical stimulation than the environment those genes originally evolved within. Every twist, every overlap, every crowded lower incisor tells a story that stretches back through your family line and further back through the broader story of human evolutionary history, all the way to a time when jaws were wide, food was tough, and chewing itself was one of the most physically demanding activities a person did every single day. The next time you look in the mirror, or the next time you look at your child's developing smile, you will know the real answer behind the crowding, the overlapping, or the misalignment staring back at you. It was never really about brushing harder or breaking a childhood habit sooner. It was about DNA, inherited across generations, colliding with a modern world that never gave your jaw the same developmental push your ancestors' jaws received every single day of their lives. Now that you understand where it truly comes from, you are equipped with something most people never get. A genuinely accurate picture of why your smile looks the way it does, and why understanding your family's genetic history matters just as much as understanding your own daily habits when it comes to caring for your teeth and making informed decisions about orthodontic treatment for yourself or for the children in your life.